Well, thank you so much for meeting with me, Ryan.
Of course.
I really
Thanks so much for having me,
appreciate.
Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, please give us a little introduction, who you are, your background with Cal State Fullerton, and what you're up to now.
Yeah, so I was super proud to transfer as a junior to Cal State Fullerton in 2004, if I'm doing my math correctly. And my initial plan was to start in international business with a focus in Spanish because I remember there's a lot of around that time there was a lot of talk about NAFTA and how NAFTA was going to affect North American commerce. And Canada mostly speaks English for the most part, and I didn't have any background in French, so I looked kind of to the south and I took a lot of Spanish in high school, and I thought international business with Spanish sounds like a great plan. But I realized that all of the upper division classes in that program were taught totally in Spanish. And my fluency was not where it needed to be to sit through 4 to 6 classes a semester in Spanish.
Yeah.
So I realized I would have flunked out just because I didn't know what anybody was talking about. So I switched to something my dad had always encouraged me to explore, which was entrepreneurship. And honestly, before I found out about the Center for Entrepreneurship at Cal State Fullerton, I had no idea that that program even existed. I thought of like the big kind of B school focuses of, accounting and finance and marketing and management or HR. And I found this degree program and I looked ahead at the coursework and I thought it was so interesting where it was like a 1 to 2 to maybe 3 classes from each of those program areas that basically shoves out a what I would consider the most well-rounded business degree out of all of them. Because I had an upper division accounting degree and I had an upper division HR degree and marketing and all that. And it was a really unique program and overall really unique experience for me. And I remember I graduated in 2006 while in escrow to buy a Cookies by Design franchise. That wasn't didn't really pan out. And there's a lot written about me in that whole process that I can share with the group if you guys would want to learn anything about it. I've I learned what corporate bankruptcy and personal bankruptcy looks like in the big meltdown of 2008 and 2009. And that I look back at that as something Alex Hormozy says, if you
Mhm.
follow him, like the
Yeah.
$100 million uh, lead guy.
Hmm.
And he talks about your first business is never going to earn, you're just going to learn.
Yeah.
And I think
Right.
about that sentiment that he shares a lot, thinking back to that time, which was at this point, I don't know, was that 15 years ago now? And I look back and I was like, yeah, that was my learning experience. I call it my $50,000 MBA program. Um, and speaking of an MBA, the highest praise I can give to the entrepreneurship program at Fullerton was from my mentor, who ended up being my employer later. So John Brake is the CEO of Desco Industries, and he just randomly happened to be my mentor for one class. I don't know what he saw in me as I mean, experientially useless 22-year-old or 21-year-old at that time. But he kept in touch with me for years after that. I told him about the cookie store thing, and he goes, "It's a franchise, don't buy it." And I remember Richard Ginnity, who was my accounting 463 professor. I'd run up to him like an excited little kid when like the newspaper comes out, and I would run to him with these 2 years of profit and loss statements for the cookie store. And he would looked at it for about 7 seconds and said, "You're buying a $36,000 job."
Hmm.
And I was like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "No, she's retiring. There's like a ton of upside here. Like, I got ideas." And it's funny to see like the reality hit you when you're in it and like escrow's closed and you're like, what the hell do I do at this 1,600 square foot store?
Mm.
But the John Brake thing stood out to me during my interview that I had to correct him at. And John said, I was Ryan's uh, mentor in his MBA program at Fullerton. And I had to correct him and said, "John, no, 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 I don't want to be misleading anybody and end up getting canceled because I lied during the interview process here. Like, that was a bachelor's program." He goes, "Huh, interesting." So I thought, like, the stuff you guys were all talking about for the years that I was at a mentor, I could have sworn that was an MBA program. And so
Yeah.
that was the icing on the cake. When I talk about, from my experience, what the entrepreneurship program meant to me in terms of experience and knowledge and all that, this is somebody who's like running one of the most successful businesses in Southern California. And the company's an ESOP, so employee stock ownership program. Just fantastic way that they manage things. And somebody like that coming in and saying, "Oh, I thought you were in a master's program the whole time." Like that said something to
Yeah.
me years later when he said that during the interview.
Yeah, it's so real. Being an
For sure.
alumni going through that program, when you're in it, it sure does feel like a master's program. I mean, you're getting the real life experience of entrepreneurship, owning
Yep.
businesses, doing your consulting. That's really funny. Yeah, it totally does. And it may not be MBA on paper, but it sure feels like you get that experience out of it. I would definitely have to agree. So there's so much to unpack there. I would love to hear kind of how you have kind of moved from your learning season in the cookie business, right, into your earning season of what you're currently doing now, how that transition happened. Tell us the story.
So I'll try to give the quickest version of this story because it's like basically the past 10 years of my life.
Yeah.
But the cookie store, so I went to work for John
Uh-huh.
for about 3 years in Chino, and super great experience. If I was still an employee anywhere, this is the only company I can ever see myself being an employee at. And the cookie store people from Texas came back to me and said, "Hey, your store is still there. The equipment's all still there. And we want to look into opening a West Coast distribution center. And I think your store, the footprint was kind of unique. A lot of those other franchisees had like rolling fridge and freezers, like a lot of restaurants do. This store was kind of unique because it had a walk-in fridge and freezer.
Okay.
So this is like in a strip mall. So
Yeah.
it's not like a big restaurant, thousands of square feet at all. But that the walk-in fridge and freezer was a really big focus, and the equipment being there really defrayed the upfront cost for anybody looking to get into something in the food service world.
Hmm.
So they made me an offer to hire me for what would have been 40% more in salary than I was making in Chino. And I could convert my 75-mile commute that I was making to 12 miles.
Oh,
And so I was like, sold.
yeah.
John, it's been great. Love you to death. And John was like, you got screwed once. Mark my words. And I was like, okay, thanks, John. As I'm like leaving in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Not, you're young and stupid. You don't listen to these people who are clearly wiser and older and more experienced than you, who are
Right.
trying to help you. And you're like, no, no, I'm good.
Yeah. Well, in the heat of the moment, you go, I know what's best for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that I remember this stuff probably over more so than I need to. So I start as the manager of this new store that was my old store that I owned as
Hmm.
the employee of this Texas company. Basically got my whole merry band of decorators. My sister worked with me for a long time because she had such experience working with me as a franchisee that it really was a shoe in for her to come back. And we were just doing our thing. And I had assumed that the company signed a 5-year lease, like most commercial leases are. Come to find out that they actually signed an 18-month early out clause on that 5-year lease. And so they basically, after about 12 or 14, maybe not almost up to that 18 months, they ran the numbers and they're like, we can't shove as many cookies through this place as we need it to be profitable with the cost of doing business in Southern California, because they
Mm,
were comparing it to a 5,000-foot industrial warehouse they had in Plano, Texas.
right.
Beautiful place if you've ever been to Plano, but not exactly the same cost of business as Westlake Village, where like Mike Sosha lives,
Yeah, for
our
sure.
neighbor, like behind our shopping center. And so they compared these two things that are not comparable and said, the numbers aren't panning out. And, what can we do? And I said, I mean, we're working multiple shifts. We've got a storage unit storing all of our packaging materials in the parking lot in the back that like we have to remember to lock. We're doing all these things. to become the volume person that you wanted us to be. And that all kind of came to a head the day that my wife and I had our first ultrasound for our son Harrison. And this is in early 2014. And did the ultrasound, got my little printout picture. It's like, I'm going to be a dad for the first time. This is like wild. Come into work late, and I drive up and I see the vice president of operations and the director of HR from Texas standing in front of my store from
Wow.
Texas.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this doesn't look good.
Yeah.
Like, I'd seen these people like twice in my life. And I'm like, yeah, this doesn't feel right. Big back stack of papers. And I'm like, and they said, hey, we're exercising our early out clause in the lease. We're closing down the store. And this was in January, I think. And I was like, okay, well, Valentine's Day is our biggest holiday next month. How are we going to close up the month? Like, what kind of timeline are we talking about? And they're like, we're closing the store today.
Wow.
Here's like everyone's final paychecks. And I'm like holding my ultrasound picture and like a
It,
final paycheck. And now I'm
oh
like
my
unemployed with
gosh.
a mortgage and a kid on the way. And I'm like, wow, this is a detour from what I thought my plan was going to be.
Yeah, totally.
And
Wow.
so my fallback has always been IT. That's like my passion. And so that's where Radar Support came from. You can look them up on Yelp. I think we still have a 5-star review rating there, even though we're closed. But that was kind of my first post cookie business. And it was really
Mhm.
just a break fix IT company. Um, got a bunch of certifications through CompTIA. I'm like a registered network technician and all this other crazy stuff, cybersecurity analyst, and all this stuff that I never used and a client never asked me for, which is something to be said about certifications in like these niche industries. But that was like my fallback was like, I have a lot of people that I work on computers for. Let's make that a real business as opposed to a hobby. So that's where Radar Support came from. And one of my clients was Bob Levitt, and he ran a distributorship that my wife knew from a YMCA camp. So they were all camp directors together. And so Bob needed somebody as like a back end administrative help. And it was really like, Ryan, what's my Wi-Fi password? Hey, Ryan, can you help me with this Excel file? Hey, Ryan, can you help me with this purchase order? And very incrementally, I was getting, I didn't see it at the time, but clearly getting roped into his business.
Hmm.
And it got to a point where we were consulting for a supplier who wanted to come into the promotional products industry, who's a trophy company based in Toronto. And one of the who I didn't know at the time was going to end up being one of my closest mentors in like my entire experience over the past 10 years. His name is Michael, fantastic person, has helped me in ways that are not reasonable at all. Like just bent over backwards to help me with whatever I ever needed help with. And so I started working with Bob part-time, a little less part-time, more and more and more. And then it got to a point where Bob's kids needed to go off to college. I don't know exactly what the conversations were between him and his wife, but I can imagine it's something to do with like, hey, this small business cash flow of like this isn't going to work when like tuition's due on the first.
Hmm.
So he looked for a more stable type of employment role with one of the largest distributors in the country and was a field sales director there with a team of 6 salespeople under him, which I think was a role that was super great for him. But then you can't work for a competitor and own your own competing business at the same time.
Hmm.
So as that employment process kind of rolled through for him, it was that he had to divest from the Bob Levitt company, and he at that point didn't really have anybody else to say who could take on the reins and kind of do him proud,
Right.
and other than me. So we worked out some arrangements in terms of some like uh, basically seller financing arrangements based on revenue. And I got to own the bright, shiny Bob Levitt company that Bob is now gone from. And I always tell people, like, they say, how'd you come up with the name for Radar Promotions? And I say, radarpromo.com was available. And that's basically it. Uh,
Yeah.
and so that has been this trajectory. And before you started recording, we talked a little about it. But I remember very clearly my first couple months in the industry was like, I knew we had this base within the YMCA world, but I never knew what to really do with it in terms of scaling it because like they all buy things differently. Sometimes you're talking to the CEO. Sometimes you're talking to the administrative assistant at one location. It's just this huge like how do you create goalposts for your mind of like this is the title of person we go after because this is the title of person that buys from us everywhere else. And how
Hmm.
do you scale that? Because I remember, the scuba example I gave you earlier, it's like I jump in the ocean with this scuba suit that Bob gave me
Yeah.
and I just get to the bottom and I'm just looking around at this entire ecosystem of promotional products of like there's whales, there's dolphins, there's turtles, there's and then minnows, that they're small. So for protection, they have to all swim together. Versus like sharks and whales, they don't need to swim with any of their buddies because they'll just bite you in half if you mess
Yeah.
with them. And so it's this widely diverse ecosystem really within the industry of like, where do you go? Like, do you have a pneumatic fishing spear like Captain Ahab and you're
Mhm.
going after a whale? Or do you have a net and you're just trying to like time the minnows swimming by to like catch as many minnows in the net as you can? And I didn't know which I was. I
Yeah.
knew like Exxon wasn't going to buy 100,000 polo shirts from me on day one,
Hmm.
but I also didn't want to kind of limit ourselves with like who we were going after in terms of growth potential. And so between Bob's background, the YMCA has always been our focus. Uh, I jokingly say internally, like for better or worse, probably will always be our primary client. Um, and it's there's an expression in the YMCA world that says if you've been to one Y, you've been to one Y, because there's 2,600 YMCA's across the United States,
Hmm.
and the point of that statement is that they're all vastly different, and they all run different. They all need different stuff. There's Ys in Oregon and like Southern Georgia that love tie dye T-shirts,
Yeah.
but tie dye is not really within the brand standards of the YMCA nationally, but locally it's like no, this is what we do. Like
Right.
it's tie dye all day, and maybe not all day, but for
Yeah.
special occasions. So it's fun to see that diversity, and that's one of the best job parts of working with that particular client. And I hope I answered that question in my
Yeah.
typical long-winded fashion.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that I'm curious, to kind of unpack how your experience at Cal State Fullerton in the Entrepreneurship Center, how did that, help to shape your perspective in going about all of this? I mean, I know we talked a little bit about how mentorship, your mentor was a huge role. He played a huge role in kind of even post graduation,
Yep,
staying in touch, keeping in touch with you, giving you
still to
that.
this day.
Yeah, which is amazing. Which I can say the same thing. I have mentors that I still talk to all the time. They're
Yep.
just they're friends of mine at this point, and it's great to have um so much wisdom, be surrounded by wisdom of people who've been there, done that, and are truly they have your best interest in mind. So I'm curious, how mentorship, any particular education that you may remember that stands out to help kind of shape this perspective moving into this.
So I would say, and I kind of touched on it earlier, the diversity of the coursework was a huge benefit to me. And I always say, like, there's a press release that came out about us today, and I specifically mentioned that I use what I learned in college, but especially Cal State Fullerton for my last 2 years every day, and I have for 20 years, because as an example with Radar Support, part of that business was consulting small businesses on accounting systems.
Mhm.
So I was, and I think I still am, a registered QuickBooks Pro Advisor. So that is pretty much what QuickBooks and Intuit will call a QuickBooks expert. But
Yeah.
my Accounting 463 class gave me the foundation to know like stuff that's unique to small businesses. Like we're not really worried about GAAP necessarily. Like public companies are very concerned about GAAP, like generally accepted accounting principles.
Right.
But small businesses don't have that same requirement. Well, keeping the books clean is a goal and everyone should strive towards it. The way we account for things has some flexibility when you're not GAAP.
Hmm.
And the difference between cash accounting and accrual accounting. I know business owners every day who could not tell you the difference between those two. And I use that stuff. So that made the pro advisor thing so much easier for me to like get that little thing I can put the sticker on my business card that I'm a pro advisor, but also have the real world experience to say, well, no, this is like the difference between materiality of a number in your business and immateriality. We don't need to, you know, beleaguer whatever the expression is, like uh, labor over $63 of whether it's meals and entertainment or cost of goods sold or whatever the example is, because you're a $1 million company. Like
Right.
$63 is immaterial.
Right.
And so that kind of stuff. Um, and then on the marketing side, really the idea of, I feel like all the marketing courses I had up to the point of like the upper division entrepreneurial marketing, which I think was 462 with JJ.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember some stuff. Like I said, I don't have my course guide here on the side of the
Yeah.
screen. And just the idea of this is not academic marketing where it's like ROI and cost per acquisition and cost per click. And it's like this very objective thing. It's like, no, and I'm a firm believer in this, and some people might disagree with me a lot on this, but I believe that the most important number on the profit and loss statement is the top like revenue number.
Hmm.
And because all the other stuff you can tweak, like you
Yeah.
can add staff, reduce staff, make a more premium product that has a higher cost of goods sold. You can tweak all that stuff. But if you're not selling, you're dying. And that has been our kind of guiding principle forever. And that always came out of the marketing courses at Fullerton, because it's not just marketing for the sake of marketing, it's marketing for the sake of sales. And
Hmm.
like this thing has to make like I have the Shopify app on my phone. We talked about Shopify a little earlier. Do you have the app on your phone?
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
you know the noise it makes.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like I think of that in my head every day. I want the Shopify app to make a cash register noise come out of my
Yeah.
cell phone every
Cha-ching.
time
Yeah.
we get, yeah, exactly. Like,
Totally.
and this is like lizard brain, like, you know,
Yeah.
uh, is it not Grant Cardone? One of the other big business speakers talks about this, of the idea of anchoring. So he anchors based on like cents before he goes on stage.
Oh yeah. Someone was just telling me about him. I'll remember the name soon. Yeah.
I want to say it's Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street guy. I could
Is
be
it
wrong.
Jordan Belfort?
I might be
I
wrong
love
about
him
that.
too.
We can fact check me after this.
Is
But
this sorry to interrupt. Is this the same guy who talks about how important time is, keeping like time management? Is this
I hope all of them
yeah,
talk.
I think it might be that same guy. Anyway, sorry to interrupt you, but
That's
yeah,
okay.
we were just talking
So,
about him.
but like that olfactory, which is like your sense of smell, that is like
Yeah.
the quickest way to your brain. You're
Yeah.
visually, they say that your eyes can take up like 5 gigabits per second of information, but it's almost overload, right? And your scent factory or your olfactory sense is like a direct hit to your brain.
Hmm.
And so he talks about that before he goes on stage, is like he has like a essential oil roller that he sticks
Yeah.
up his nose, that just gets him like it's like Pavlov's dogs. Like they hear the dinner bell ring and it's like it's on time. I'm going on stage in front of however many thousand people. This is my on switch.
Right.
And you know that has always been the Shopify noise is my silly example of that, of like we were able to push the cart a little further up the hill with that little cash register noise.
Totally. Yeah, and there's something to be said about it. There definitely is. Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, that's funny. We were just talking about that the other day. Well, hey, I know that you are a very busy man. You have some things to do. But I would love you to just end off with, I know you have an event coming up here in the next couple days that some people may be able to hear you speak at. So I'd love for you to touch base what the event is, what you'll be speaking about.
Yeah, of course. So I am really proud to be the SAC secretary. SAC stands for the Specialty Advertising Association of California. And as an executive board committee person, I get to talk about the event a lot. the goal of this organization really is supporting the entire promotional products industry within Southern California. And our showcase or kind of big deal event that's put on annually is called the SAC Expo. You guys can go to saac.net and get all the information there. It's coming up on Thursday and Friday of this week. Sounds like Aaron and I are would be like considered vetted customers, but there's also on Friday an end buyer day. So if you're a consumer, or purchaser, buyer, or consultant in the promotional products world for your company, we'd love to have you. It's a free attendance event on Friday. It will be all of our manufacturers, suppliers, decorators from our industry there. It's a sold out show for a bunch of areas, but we've got some space left for buyers on Friday. And really, we just want to share the industry and show off our industry capabilities. Taking off my board member hat and putting on my like radar promotions hat, our company is really proud to lean into what we call regional associations. So SAC is the regional association for our international body for Southern California, but we're also members of one in the Midwest and one in Virginia. And so we lean into these regional associations and fly to them when they're not in California, and then basically grab all of our clients from the surrounding area. And like, like the tour guide that waves the flag, in those tourist areas, when you get off the bus with 50 tourists, I'm like that guy at the front of the line with the flag. It's like, okay, follow me. We're going to talk about sublimated blankets right now.
Yeah.
Okay, next up is screen printed towels and why you want to use water-based inks on towels, not oil-based plastisol inks. The viewers of this might be lost upon that, but I know Aaron knows the difference. I'll point it out just for everybody. Basically, you rub a towel on your face that's like printed with t-shirt ink and it like scratches your face off.
Yeah.
That's why water-based inks are so important for towels. But it's just these little details where we can say like, no, there's like a quality. You can get a cheap towel and we can do those all day long, but nobody's going to want to use them. And, from a sustainability perspective and from an eco-friendly perspective, our industry is really trying to move the needle on effective, lasting, long cost, like spreading the impressions out of that promotional product. Whether it's a water bottle and somebody says, hey, Aaron, where'd you get that Lynx hat? Or what is Lynx? Like I think I said at the beginning of this call. And we got to talk about your company the whole time that I thought I was going to be interviewed. And it was great because I learned something about you based on a promotional product.
Totally. Yeah.
The industry as a whole always talks about how we think that promotional products are the most effective advertising investment for any company because it is the only investment that engages your viewers or recipients or employees complete five senses, right? You can have a candle that really smells nice. You can have a hoodie that's extra soft than any other hoodie you have in the closet. And then I always like to talk about the extra sense. This has really synthesized a lot for me since COVID, where everyone was drop shipping employee gifts to people's houses who were working remote. And I talk about this additional sense as belonging, because when we're all remote, like I don't have anything handy with my logo right at my desk. Oh, here's a pickleball with the Y logo on it,
There you go.
like cropping out. But
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome.
go outside, play pickleball, like stay healthy. That kind of stuff that creates a sense of belonging. Like if I'm a YMCA pickleball instructor and I'm stuck at home because my state doesn't allow me to play pickleball, I don't know if that's a great example for the point I'm trying to make, but that I think promotional products, when they're done right, can just be marketing magic. Like
Yeah.
where you just look at this thing and you could cover the logo up on something and you would know if it's done right, what logo's on that for the rest of your life. Because
Hmm.
it was that prolific of an impact for you, whether it's the product is like the perfect color or the logo you've never seen. Like I think of the Disneyland hoodies that have the really wide print on
Yeah.
the back
Yeah.
that use puff ink. And
Hmm.
like I know we might not have a bunch of screen print nerds here on this chat, but
Yeah.
puff ink is an additive when it hits the dryer and it goes through the what I call the giant Quiznos oven, like the ink puffs up
Yeah.
and people look at, but that Disneyland thing, they've never, like most people who have felt screen printing have never felt like a raised or a puff type of additive. And the industry is like, yeah, we've got that all day. What, you just never asked for it.
Totally.
Our industry does a poor job of saying, no, you can get glow in the dark ink. No,
Hmm.
you can get puff additives. Like we just did a glow in the dark project 2 weeks ago for somebody that was at Comic Con, and it was the weirdest project. I never thought it would be glow in the dark ink would be the right like decorating method for this project, but he was like, no, this is gonna be perfect. And I was like, let's do it.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah, it's so true, especially with that Disneyland example of with the puff. I mean, and for those who have been to Disneyland, you know exactly what we're talking about. What it looks like, that huge logo on the back, and it stands out. You know,
Right.
that's something that it's quality, it lasts, you're gonna wear it forever. You're gonna remember your time at Disneyland. So it makes you come back to Disney. It's that marketing magic, as you said.
And that's really like, of course, the guy selling promotional products is gonna say promotional products are the
Yeah.
best ever. But
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm okay. Like, take me to task on that claim, because when you really look at like email marketing, Google AdWords, SEO, website design, all this other digital marketing stuff, you know, handed somebody a gift that said, "Hey, I appreciate your business. Thanks so much." Like, we're working on a pen project for a law firm in Orange County where the stuff that they're looking for, they've never asked about the price of this pen. And we've sent samples and mock-ups, and they're like, no, we want the logo to look perfect.
Hmm.
And that's our kind of minimum level expectation internally for our company. We just got off the call with a giant college in New York this morning who we said, what's the biggest problem with what you're currently doing with promotional products? And he said, we got 1,000 t-shirts where the logo was an inch off,
Oh,
like shifted to the right. And it's like,
yeah.
that's a giant problem that, like, I
Huge.
mean, you and I know that's like amateur hour stuff.
Right.
And, you know, if that's the problem that I need to surpass to earn this college's business, I'm doing a great job
Hmm.
because
Right.
we're working with some of the best screen printers that I know in the country, the best embroiderers. And I proudly say, if I've touched your product, something's gone wrong in the process. And I
Yeah.
know this is kind of where Aaron's and my business differ a little. But at the end of the day, like, we're responsible for the product that goes out.
Hmm.
Whether Aaron made it himself with his team or Radar and our production team made it, it's our problem either way.
Yeah.
And so I love that um, kind of built-in meritocracy of our industry. And that's something that I really think about a lot is like, if we can service the heck out of a client, a project, or whatever, or even a complaint, um, we should or earn business if we're going above and beyond these people's expectations every single time, like under promising, over delivering all the
Mhm.
time. And from my little simplistic mind, we should earn the business from that perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
You
And
too.
I definitely hope we have the opportunity to do this again.
I hope so. Well, thanks so much for taking time out for me, Aaron, too.
Absolutely. Anytime. Thank you, Ryan.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you soon.